Welcome to Star Spangled Gamblers. I'm your host, Alex Keeney, and I'm with my co-host, Brandon Thompson. For those of you listening for the first time, we're a political betting podcast. We gamble on a platform called Predict It that's safe, legal, and if you listen to us, profitable. Today we're going to be talking about betting on Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation. So strap yourselves in. This is a fast-moving story, and it's changing even as we record this. As always, hit us on Twitter and Instagram with your thoughts, suggestions, and ideas for trades. We're at Star Spangled Gamblers. Brandon, play that song. So this week in our Best Bet section, we're going to be taking on maybe one of the most volatile markets since the 2008 housing crash. That is, of course, if you're watching the news, Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation hearing, which has been, surprising is the word I would use. So if you log on to Predict It, there are literally dozens of markets. Almost all of them terrify me in my wallet, but we're going to talk about as many of them as we can to get started today. Brandon, how are you thinking about this? Do you have like a master track tourist in your brain here?
Well, the way I'm thinking about it is, I know that there's basically two approaches I think you could do here. One is to look at how they voted on judges in the past, and the other is to look at it purely as an electoral calculus. And I think I take the purely electoral tack. I'm looking at.
Wait. So are you going like full Machiavelli here and just saying who dollars and cents does it help to vote yes, and who does it vote on a dollars and cents basis to vote no for Brett Kavanaugh?
Yeah, and I think it's actually a little less cynical than that. It's that, if you take this as a politician's job is to represent the state they're from, then they kind of should, do what the popular vote wants. I don't think they should always do that. I think there are exceptions.
Yeah. So I think I'm thinking in a similar way, but I've grouped three categories, and I'm calling them loose cannons. And so under the loose cannons, this is the who knows what the fuck is going to happen group. I've got Jeff Flake way out in front of that pack. I've got Joe Manchin.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've got Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp in the loose cannons column. And we can come back to that. I've got pragmatists, and these are thoughtful people that I think we can all agree to respect. Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. They're definitely getting most of the attention. And I've got lost causes if you're Mitch McConnell or Brett Kavanaugh, that is, and those are Joe Donnelly and Claire McCaskill. I don't know. Who do you think? Someone in this story is going to play the role of spoiler. There's someone who is going to do something. It's going to be Hollywood. It's going to be unexpected. It's going to be dramatic. I don't know which way it's going to break, but who do you have circled?
Well, I think the ones that I'm most concerned about, not spoiling, but going against the way I predict them to go, are Collins and Murkowski, because those two come. If you're looking at it on an electoral basis, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever for them to vote no. So Murkowski is from Alaska, obviously, and in 2010, she lost the Republican primary and then won the election as a write-in, and the Republican got second.
But by the way, one of the greatest demonstrations of pneumatic devices, which I've never paid attention to, but apparently that write-in campaign was just all radio ads rhyming how to spell Murkowski.
Good morning, boys and girls.
Good morning, Mr. Davis.
Today, we are going to learn how to vote for Lisa Murkowski. Yay! It's as easy as 2 steps.
Fill it in, write it in,
and send it in.
I'm Lisa Murkowski, and I approve this message.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
So anytime you think democracy is bland, just give it another try.
Yeah, that's fantastic. If you can't learn how to spell a candidate's name, you definitely should be able to vote.
Is that a poll tax?
No. But then
attention, Illinois Bar Association.
Oh God. But then, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds here, but in 2016, again, the Democrat in the race, when she ran for re-election, got fourth and got 13% of the vote. I swear to you, Alex, if you pull up the Wikipedia page for that election, the Democrat does not have a picture. So
It was actually a bear with a bullet in its gut, and her dad was the one who put it there.
So, like, if you talking about what you want to do to get reelected, why on earth does she vote no? And it seems to be that she has a conscience about this. So I don't know how to predict that.
I don't get it either, because if you look at where Lisa Murkowski breaks with Republicans, it's like very practical shit. It's like most of my state lives in a really remote area or is an indigenous people and has no access to healthcare. So like maybe I shouldn't vote to repeal healthcare. It's not like the person that I'm circling is kind of on the opposite end of this continuum. I and a lot of political wannabes are circling Jeff Flake as the one who's going to do something totally crazy. And like, Jeff Flake is crazy for the opposite reason. Like, he is the closest thing there is to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. He's a politician with a conscience. He's a politician who isn't running for re-election. And that's like the most dangerous thing in the world if you're party leadership, is someone who doesn't need to get reelected and someone who votes the way he's feeling. So if you're going to take a wild and crazy bet, you can get decent odds on Flake. Jeff Flake voting no on Kavanaugh's confirmation is at 60-40. And we can talk all day about what makes him a weird and wild and crazy and interesting dude. I mean, he should have his own little like Netflix series or something.
What do you mean by that?
Like Jeff. Okay. So for those of you tuning in for the first time, my background is I was a legislative aide on Capitol Hill when Jeff Flake was in the House of Representatives.
We're all very impressed.
Well, my bank account isn't. Jeff Flake was every staffer's least favorite member of Congress, not because he's a bad dude. Like, I think everybody likes Jeff Flake, but he would go down in the middle of appropriation season where you read these 500-page bills line by line, and any member of Congress at any time can say, repeat that line, I've got an amendment on it. And he would go down there with dozens, maybe hundreds of amendments to get rid of earmarks. This is when earmarking was still a thing. So you would literally stay up all night. There'd be like a 3-hour section of a Tuesday night, midnight to 3 a.m., where you just hear Jeff Flake offering amendments to strike earmarks that got shot down every single time. And he did that for like 10 years. And then he became a senator, and he does the same thing in the Senate. So, he's my dark horse to ruin this whole thing for Mitch McConnell.
You know what? I would have agreed with you like 6 months ago when it turned out that he was not going to seek re-election, and he was very critical of Trump. I thought he was going out like goddamn Jerry Maguire, leaving the office. And he has been all bark and zero bite. He can issue all the scathing statements he wants. He can talk, like from this higher ivory tower all he wants. And the reality of the fact is he's stepped in line with the Republicans at every important point. So I'll be very surprised.
But here's the thing that's interesting, because the markets kind of agree with you. I was checking the Flake market yesterday, and the yield was about double to get a no on him. You could buy a no on Flake for about 30 cents, and today it costs you about 60 cents. So people seem to be cooling off on Jeff Flake blowing things up. But I will say this about Jeff Flake. Everybody has a motive no matter what they're doing. And whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, if you observe the process up close, everybody wants the best thing. But Jeff Flake has always struck me as a guy who, as a senator, as an American, and as a conservative, who is thinking about what is the best thing in the next 100 years. He came out of the think tank world. He's from that type of mindset. So I think of Jeff Flake, if he was a no vote, it's because, and you've read these hot takes in the press about how ramming through a Supreme Court justice on a party line vote with certain clouds of controversy around him is just not good for the health of democracy and not good for the Republican Party. I see a no vote from Jeff Flake if it's coming from there.
I guess I could say that too. I mean, I think that at some point this thing might start to snowball. Today was the first day I heard, sources say, a rumor in here say that McConnell does not have the votes right now. And as soon as that becomes legitimate, people are going to start stepping out and voting no.
And I read what's going on in the Senate right now, and I think, before this scandal broke with Brett Kavanaugh, you could tell the McConnell strategy was to try and pin the Joe Manchins and the Claire McCaskills and the Joe Donnellys between the center right and the populist right in their state, that sometimes the Obama Trump voters, to pin them between the Obama Trump voters and the liberal Democratic Party. Well, now that there's this scandal out there, his ability, that fulcrum is more or less dissipated. So now I sense that what McConnell's trying to do is basically to pin Republicans between their angry voters and their jobs, and to say, you go out there and if you vote no, I dare you to vote no. I dare you to tell your constituents that the one thing you promised them, actually one of the two things you promised them, you didn't get them an Obamacare repeal. And I dare you to go home and tell them you couldn't get a justice today.
As it turns out, they didn't want that. Who knew? Who knew?
Voters, I'll tell you what voters want. Voters want low taxes and generous entitlements. And that's why we're $20 trillion in debt right now.
Hey, there's a magic lamp somewhere we can rub to fix it.
Right. It's called Our Children.
This is a good time to take a beat. And we're going to say the term best bets a lot on the show just because that's what people in gambling shows do. But holy shit, has the last week taught us that nothing is certain. Would you have ever predicted that this guy with his goddamn lever to beaver haircut would have a sex scandal? I mean, it's like if John Kerry got caught with steroids in the suitcase at the airport. You'd be like, how is that even possible? It's insane.
Yeah, I keep thinking that like nothing is going to be surprising to me. And I keep coming up with ways to explain why it's not surprising to me. So if you'll walk the plank with me for a second here, like
I always do.
Yeah, that's right. So, when you watch a TV show, like I think of like Game of Thrones or The Sopranos or something like that, and you see a character get like an object or a piece of information, and like that one thing, this like one physical object just contains all of the stakes of 7 seasons of TV or something like that. That's what I see. What I see is basically two dueling conspiracy theories that both pivot on Brett Kavanaugh and like both no one can ignore anymore. So the question of should he be a justice on the Supreme Court or not is not the question that I think many people are asking, or at least the people who are voting. Like, I think that the question that is really being litigated in the gut of angry voters and angry legislators is, if you're a Republican, your conspiracy theory is this is the next step of liberals making it illegal to disagree with them. And if you're a Democrat and you're biting on the conspiracy theory that's playing out here, I think this is another instance of a fraudulent majority trying to repress women and minorities. And I don't think they're going to get control of that. I think that that's just the question. And I think that one way or another, this is what's going to be what it's going to be.
You're talking about dueling conspiracy theories. And I'm just going to have to request that if we're going to do this podcast in the future, you not smoke weed before it, because I think it's having a negative effect on your takes. No, I'm kidding. I'm just joking. It was when you said there are two conspiracies, man. I was like right about to just get off the Keeney ship. But you're absolutely right. I think there's these big existential questions. Both sides are digging in so hard because of what this would mean for future nominations that I think this is now well beyond the merits of Brett Kavanaugh's nomination.
Dude, Bart Kavanaugh, right? Thanks, Mike Judge. Like, I'm just sitting here, how many bad metaphors can you create for one thing? Like, I'm sitting here thinking about, you remember when you read about those World War I battles or Civil War battles or something where like all the generals just decided, well, I guess we have to fight here at Verdun or Antietam or something like that because like the war will be over if we don't. But like, really, they didn't matter. Like, really, you could fight at Gettysburg, or really, you could fight at the Bloody River Somme or something like that. Really, they could nominate another Supreme Court justice. Really, the Republicans are still favored to hold the Senate. Like, really, there are a lot of other outcomes that could come from this. But for one reason or another, the choice has been made by the people who make choices that this battle has to be fought and someone has to lose it.
But you're right. It's a zero-sum game at the end. And I do think that it's, as you said, from the right, it's that if Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed, then if you slapped a girl on the ass in high school, you'll never be successful. And on the left, it's if Kavanaugh does get confirmed, then women are not safe in this country. And I don't think either is true. I think I understand where both of them came from. I really do. But I just, neither of them is true.
So if I can get back to what we really care about, which is money, we don't really let's be honest, we're very public about the fact that right and wrong are just not things that we worry about when we're talking to a microphone. Maybe we worry about them in our private lives.
Gave up on it long ago.
So I'll be honest with you guys. I'm not in these markets. I'm thinking about getting into them, but if you want to be a little more aggressive, I think that there might be some long shots in the Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp marketplaces. Brandon thinks there might be some long shots and shotgunning beers over there in Chicago.
I don't know what you're talking about. I was opening up a textbook.
So Joe Manchin right now, let me pull up the odds on Manchin. So Joe Manchin, you can get a yes for 39 cents on him. So if it's your first time tuning in, a yes on PredictIt means at 39 cents means that if you get that bet right, your 39 cents turn into $1. So that's a pretty decent multiplier. Now, why do I think that Joe Manchin might vote for a Republican Supreme Court justice under these circumstances? So if you look at some of the other Democrats out there that people used to think that that Mitch McConnell could yank into doing this, names that come up, Joe Donnelly and Claire McCaskill. Remember, I said those were the lost causes. Those are Trump Democrats that have big cities with big suburbs. There are plenty of soccer moms selling real estate or developing software that maybe might not have voted or maybe would have voted Republican, that I think that gives those Democrats an even better reason not to vote for a Republican Supreme Court justice. However, Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp, these are rural states dependent on manufacturing, resource extraction. I don't think they have a piggy bank of kind of young professional women to appease. They've got a lot of angry people who voted for Trump for whatever reason. And those people are still going to be like, I think that they still need to appease those voters. I think they still think that they need to find a way to appease those Trump Democrats. So might be a sleeper pick in there for Joe Manchin and Heidi Heitkamp.
Well, Joe Manchin, so far publicly, his only statements have been that I believe that he sees no reason not to confirm. And you're right that he's coming from a very different place in terms of demographics. He's, like I said, a rural state, but he is the senator that will break with Democrats on environmental issues, particularly coal. And so he's not afraid to break with the party on this, but at the same...
Or cultural issues.
Yeah, at the same time, though, Real Clear Politics has him on average up 9 points in the latest poll. He's running against someone who was born in New Jersey, which I feel like immediately disqualifies you in West Virginia. So I'll agree with you. When this thing started, I thought Manchin was for sure a yes vote, but as his race gets less competitive, I am less concerned about this. But this is a state, to your point, where if you're running negative ads that say Joe Manchin, voted down a justice that have protected the Second Amendment, I think that still matters in West Virginia.
Yeah, well, and also, like, if you come after Joe Manchin, like, literally he will shoot you for those of you.
Oh my God, he's done that twice now.
Yeah. Do you think, okay, by the way, Joe Manchin just owns the franchise on shooting inanimate objects on television to prove that he's a good senator. He shot a cap and trade bill. He shot an Obamacare lawsuit. Are we done with seeing senators shooting inanimate objects? I feel like it's his now. I don't know. I don't know. Is it a ripoff if like Heidi Heitkamp starts macheteing things or something?
I think at this point you got to go big or go home. You got to use like a bazooka or something. Can you still get one of those? Like in Vegas, you can shoot a bazooka, right? Did I make that up?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like in South Dakota, don't they have a bunch of nuclear missile bunkers or something like that? Like there's
Yeah, that's mostly what South Dakota is. But yeah, to your point, his ad, and that also should very much worry Republicans generally in this next election that Joe Manchin previously shot an environmental regulation bill to show that he was going to help West Virginia, and then he shot the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. That should concern Republicans if that is his message, because Uncle Joe has done a great job of maintaining his Democratic power in a deep, deep red state.
Maybe Uncle Joe, like, I think Uncle Joe is actually, well, I mean, with all due respect to Vice President Joe Biden, I guess we can have two Uncle Joes, but maybe Joe Manchin is like that octopus in Germany that predicted the World Cup. Like maybe whatever Joe Manchin shoots is just guaranteed to survive.
I mean, people love him down there. He was the governor before he was a senator. I don't know. I mean, you can't, it's weird too, because we talk all the time and we'll continue to talk about the quirks of politics. Like Joe Manchin was the face of West Virginia, like the government and aid during some pretty bad natural disasters there. Like never count that out. That is part of the reason he's popular.
Yeah, by the way, West Virginia, I live in California now, and I'm like kind of cashed out on states that are ideologically simplified, California being one of them, to some extent Texas, these sort of single party states. West Virginia, people are not giving West Virginia enough credit for producing interesting and exciting candidates. Like Joe Manchin is a boss. There's this congressman, this Democratic congressman. I'm not even a Democrat. There's this Democratic congressman named Richard Ojeda, who's like basically an extra from the Sons of Anarchy, who is running a really tight race. And frankly, the other senator from West Virginia, Shelley Moore Capito, is I think as good of a senator as they're out there. So don't count out those Mountaineers.
Yeah. I mean, I think somebody asked him about a month back in the campaign what he felt about the poll numbers, and he said he didn't give a shit. I mean,
that's probably exactly what he
said. No, it really is. I don't remember. The only part of that quote I'm not paraphrasing is the shit part. I know he swore because I thought it was awesome.
I think Joe Manchin probably has, like, he's the lucky guy who has like a full head of chest hair, but like no back hair. He's Burt Reynolds. Like if Burt Reynolds was a senator, R.I.P. bro, Joe Manchin.
You had to bring up back hair. I thought we had some rules about not making it personal on this, but it's all right. Duly noted.
All right. So I'm going to hit you with some truth here. You ready?
As ready as I could be.
I'm in one of these markets. I'm in one of these Kavanaugh markets. I bought yes on Tennessee Senator Bob Corker, Republican. I bought yes at 58 cents on him supporting Kavanaugh before October 31st. I think that this is a market. One of the things I love about gambling and politics is that there's a lot of dumb money in it, which is probably what savant investors say about much more lucrative things, trading billion-dollar bonds that I don't understand.
Nobody does.
Yeah. I mean, I mostly just lose money. Don't ask me about, there's a reason why this isn't a podcast about Bitcoin. Bob Corker gets a lot of press for disagreeing with President Trump. It's like almost always there's a quote in every New York Times article about Bob Corker saying the way you just dealt with Vladimir Putin or the way you're dealing with Iran. It's Corker, especially on those foreign policy things. Bob Corker has publicly said, he said last week that unless Ford testified on Monday that we should be voting on this nominee by Monday. He's done nothing but signal that he wants to vote for Brett Kavanaugh. So unless this scandal gets worse, and I'm in the camp that doesn't believe that it will. I think that this will always be a he said, she said thing. So as long as the question is it he said, she said, I think Bob Corker votes yes. I think that that's a great bet. I'm in it. I'm looking to get in deeper too.
God, I think you're right. It's depressing because the idea that he said, she said is equivalent to a toss-up that nobody knows what's right is utter nonsense. But I think you're right. I think that Corker he's voting yes. Sometimes it's very hard to square his position in situations like this versus other parts of his politics. Because I know when he votes yes, liberals will extol him and talk about him being valueless. That's just not true. Bob Corker is a champion in the Senate of legislation to curb human trafficking. So there are parts of his politics that are very human rights oriented, and things are they're laudable. Even the most left Democrat would laud, and yet for some reason he just doesn't. He will not break the party on this, and I don't know why.
Well, but Tennessee's an interesting state because I think we all simplify politics. So people look at Tennessee in the last few presidential elections, it's gone Republican, right? But Tennessee does not pick hardcore Republicans. Bob Corker is not a hardliner. Lamar Alexander, the other Tennessee senator, is not a hardliner. So there's actually a really interesting race going on to replace Senator Alexander right now between Marsha Blackburn, who's known. How do you describe Marsha Blackburn? She's like literally when you imagine a Nashville cheerleading mom, pearl clutching, loud, shrill voice, doesn't know when to stay quiet. Like that's Marsha Blackburn. Marsha Blackburn is well to the right of all of these people. So I think that one of the reasons why that Senate race, which I'm not betting on yet, that's a tough one, is that Tennessee is not a blood red state. It's not. Might look that way if you look at the last few elections, but it's not. So it's not the last time we'll hear from Bob Corker.
Now, let me ask you this. So I see that Kavanaugh testifying publicly by the 28th, which is Friday, is only at the yes price on that is 75 cents. That seems low to me. It seems really unlikely he wouldn't testify on Thursday.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I think that the right way to think about this is, okay, so like what's the question behind the question, right? So will Kavanaugh testify by Friday? Well, he's probably only going to testify if Ford testifies, right? So to me, that's like a two variable question. And the price probably reflects the fact that, if you look at will Ford testify publicly by that same day, the market is actually much tougher. It's a yes at 46 cents. So there's a 46% chance in the marketplace that she'll do it. So I think that that's what's being priced in there.
Yeah. So, and I hate to speak about this issue in terms of wins and losses, because you're talking about someone talking about a deeply personal, deeply disturbing experience. But in terms of the back and forth over the weekend of Grassley issuing a deadline and then Ford's lawyer pushing it and going back and forth to try to get these little concessions, I think that was probably just trying to make someone who is not in the public eye comfortable with coming out. But if it really was some sort of political gamesmanship about getting more concessions to the hearing, the Democrats definitely won it, which is not a position they find themselves in often.
I find that second point so funny. I've worked many years with Republicans, and now I work in Hollywood television writers' rooms full of, I don't think that there's been a Republican in Hollywood since Ronald Reagan. And the universal agreement between all partisans is, man, we really suck at winning, dude. The other guys are so much better, which is, I think, also what Republicans are saying right now. Why are we letting this woman push us around? Of course, they wouldn't say that publicly, but that's why Brett Kavanaugh's on Fox News last night like a robot.
Oh my God. Nino Scalia must have been rolling over in his freaking grave to see a potential SCOTUS justice campaigning on Fox News for the nomination. That is gross. I hope we don't see it again in 50 years, Republican or Democrat. That was ridiculous, man. If you're on Fox News with your wife in tow to go on this propaganda thing for your Supreme Court nomination, you fucked up. That is just so ridiculous. They're supposed to be ivory tower dorks. But you're supposed to be talking about the cases, and Jesus, to have to do that to save your ass.
But this is it. This is the game that we were talking about earlier. This is the game, is that if you are a conservative, you believe that this is if you let Brett Kavanaugh be sunk by accusations that, whether you think it's right or wrong, you probably can never prove them, and you can probably never disprove them either. That's probably a fact. If you are a conservative in that situation, the mentality is, if we don't fight this one, we will never, ever, ever beat it. This will be every single time. Any person we nominate for anything, it will be 36 years ago, in a room at Georgetown Prep, this happened. So again, I just think that this is just a fight that meaning has been attached to, that I wish it wasn't. I really wish it wasn't.
I think it's so ridiculous, honestly, because that's not the way this is going to be. Gorsuch got Democratic votes, Someone posted a great list today of all the Republican appointed justices who got plenty of votes. This is not, I don't know, this is not a war on Republicans. This is it's two things. It's a guy that has a lot of skeletons in his past and seems to continue lying. And it's admittedly a very pent up angry base over Merrick Garland not being on the Supreme Court. So I think it's a combination of those two things.
And now you hear kind of slipping out of the side of people's mouths. I think Axios reported that Elizabeth Warren and Cory Booker have been going fundraiser to fundraiser, talking about maybe having court packing on their agenda for a 2020 run. It's getting out of control, but we'll leave that to people who are a lot smarter and a lot dumber than us to talk about what's right and wrong about that. We're just going to tell you that it's kind of fucked up. And if you want to play in these markets, you're either going to make a lot of money or lose a lot of money, because the volatility is like nothing I've ever seen.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just even for 2018, strange times.
Yes, indeed. Brandon, you got anything else? You watching any other markets here? Oh, you know what? Rand Paul. You can get a yes on Rand Paul voting for Kavanaugh at 65 cents. So it's a better buy to get Corker, but Rand Paul, he's an interesting dude. I don't know. I mean, if you're juggling balls between whether or not you're going to bet on Rand Paul or Bob Corker supporting this nomination, I think Bob Corker's the safer bet. Rand Paul, he's another guy who tends to vote as conscious and tends to do things that he thinks are intellectually or morally defensible and not in the interest of his party or necessarily even the country. And that's just that's a dangerous dude to have on your team if you're party leadership.
Yeah, I mean, it's inexplicable to me that he seems to be the one person that can do this. It doesn't matter whether he follows party lines. He's just that popular. But I just don't see anything in Kavanaugh's past that would make Rand Paul question him. I mean, I just don't see that I just don't see what would spook him about him. There's no way to look at big government or the typical stuff that Rand Paul rants about and say Kavanaugh, is against any of that. I don't see it.
Yeah, and like when you talk about what motivates different politicians in their own weird way, we talked about Jeff Flake maybe playing for the 100-year game. Like, I don't even know what game Rand Paul's playing in. I guess Rand Paul's playing in like the intellectual purity game, but he does shit that's cool. I mean, I don't see any other Republicans who went to Rand Paul went to Howard University to give some big speech, a big pitch why conservatism and Republicans can actually be helpful to the Black community. I don't see any other Republicans doing that. I don't see any other Republicans with their own foreign policy. Rand Paul does cool shit. He doesn't vote the way that I would want him to, but you know what? More power to him.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You often disagree with him strongly, but he at least takes swings. I mean, this guy apparently is so popular. If he just fell on the party line, he'd be a senator until he died. And he continues to do things that, he just does. I really believe he does not give a crap what the Republican Party thinks about what he's doing.
No. He thinks like there are definitely politicians that have the same mindset as, I don't know, whatever assholes founding the app that we're all going to be using next year or next month or something. It's just, I'm smarter and the party will come to me. I think that's the outlook that someone like Rand Paul has.
Although, you know what? There is a mark against him in that a few years back, one of his neighbors beat his ass over some sort of like lawn care dispute that makes you think that not only is he a bad neighbor, but he's also kind of a wimp because he got beat up by his neighbor. So maybe his neighbor's a tough guy. I don't know.
I will tell you this. When you have to count on Rand Paul, it's really frustrating. So maybe Rand Paul was supposed to be getting his mail while he was on vacation or something, and like the neighbor just snapped. It's just like the last time that Rand Paul just wouldn't take his newspapers off his doorstep or water his lawn or something. He's not a reliable dude.
Not reliable. What is reliable though is America's favorite beverage, beer. Should we talk about who needs one this week?
Dude, I need one. You want to flip one over here?
Hey, if I could download you one through the internet, my man, I would.
Let's get some space-time continuum shit going.
Yeah, so this is a segment that we do occasionally called Who Needs a Beer, meaning in this crazy world we live in now, who's had a particularly rough time and just needs to crack one open, put their feet up, and, I don't know, watch anything other than CNN.
By the way, I reserve the right to distribute beers to people who I think deserve one as well. I want to leave that open. I don't know if I have any this week, but some people deserve beers.
Fair point. It's almost like we're ripping off tip of the cap, wag of the finger, but on a bigger scale.
Is that a thing?
Oh, is that a thing? You haven't watched our 47th president, Stephen Colbert? Tip of the cap, wag of the finger was one of the best segments in the Colbert Report.
Oh, no. What's the quote from Picasso? Good artists imitate, great artists steal.
Oh, then we must be great.
Yeah, we're fine.
So I got a couple in the chamber. Do you want to lead off? You want me to talk about?
Yeah. So I think Chuck Grassley needs a beer. I don't know how close you guys follow the news, but Chuck Grassley was outed this week. Side note: he outed himself as a nerd from his Twitter. This is a quote. With all extensions we give Dr. Ford to decide if she still wants to testify to the Senate, I feel like I'm playing second trombone in the Judiciary Orchestra and Schumer is the conductor. Who knew?
Yeah, who outs himself as a band geek? That's a strong play from Chuck Grassley.
Dude, do you think that's the chip that he has on his shoulder?
Maybe. Maybe this is worth a Google deep dive. Like, did he go to Iowa and play in the marching band?
I don't know. But here's the thing about Chuck Grassley is he's actually like a really well-liked dude. I will say that. He is, I'm not going to say he's like the Tom Brady of the Senate, but he's definitely like the Jared Goff or the Matt Ryan or something like that.
Bland?
People like Chuck Grassley, but so
inoffensive,
reliable. Yeah, that's right. You can give him the ball. He's not going to throw a pick. He plays well with others. But I don't know why he would choose to do this to himself. Why he would out himself is beyond me. But I'm sure Republicans need tuba and trombone players.
Well, I mean, Chuck Grassley, among all the political figures, their Twitter feed confuses me. His Twitter feed confuses me most because he uses weird abbreviations, but also tweets a lot. So I'm like, do you run this? Because your old man abbreviations seem to indicate you do, or you just have a staffer that's always trying to pack the words in. I can't even tell. I think it's him.
He also clearly doesn't know about punctuation, which makes me think that like he definitely still thinks he's writing telegrams.
Oh yeah, I mean, look, his tweets are very reminiscent of some senior law partners that I've had to work with in the past, where it's kind of just you got to decipher the email as if the keyboard were optional.
I think he's actually I think it's the same thing as just signaling from your farmhouse to the town that you need more like millet or water or something like that. Like hard to teach an old dog new tricks, but he's a great dog.
As if you know what millet is. Does anyone?
Don't they make like non-dairy creamer out of it now?
Oh, gross. Oh man, I wish I didn't know that.
I don't know. If they can make milk, if they can make oat milk, you can't tell me they can't make a fucking millet milk.
I feel like I've seen that on the shelves or at least the millet classic version of just dry millet in a bag. I feel like I've seen that and thought that looks chewy. Like it's not gonna be great.
That and like shitty beer. Just give me a Bud Light. That's all I want.
Oh god, so simple.
Fucking Luddite Republican here. You got Brandon.
So first person I need a beer. I'll tell you who needs a beer is Paul Gosar. Now,
buddy.
This, for people that don't obsessively follow Twitter, this might come as a little surprise. Paul Gosar is the representative from Arizona's 4th District. He's up for re-election now, and there is a big surprise commercial out with him where 6 people talk about how terrible Paul Gosar is, and at the end, they're his siblings, and that's supposed to be the big reveal about the commercial. And so I have to...
It's like a fucking Hitchcock movie. You're like, what? Like,
no,
his mom's dead?
There's a couple of different levels of this that are just awesome, which someone pointed out on Twitter. I apologize for not remembering the handle, but someone said, like, Paul Gosar is projected to win this race by about 35 points. And his siblings hated him so much, they were like, screw it, let's just shit on him anyway.
True story. First of all, like, fucking someone named Paul Gosar has to be like Paul Gosar. And I remember when I was a junior staffer in the House, and people would like, they'd come in, your like constituents would come in with some lobbyist in a shiny suit and be like, we need you to co-sponsor HR 2273 to give the bricklayers industry a tax break or an exempt, whatever. It could be any one of like 1,000 things. And anytime you saw a bill that had Paul Gosar's name on it, you're like, oh, fuck that. Like, we can't go near that shit.
Yeah.
He's just synonymous with mediocrity.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so this gentleman from Arizona tried to impeach the head of the EPA. He said he was going to boycott Pope Francis if he didn't address, quote, violent Islam. And he said that Charlottesville was funded by the riots with the white supremacists was funded by George Soros. This dude is nuts. I feel like if you had to call him to like whip up votes for like an infrastructure bill, he would answer the phone and say that, you know, Panda Express was a plant by China to spy on us. Like, he's crazy. But the thing that is kind of getting lost in this sibling thing is that, yes, 6 of Paul Gosar's siblings recorded this commercial. But Mr. Gosar is one of 10 children. So 3 did not. And I assume they were asked. I want to watch that reality show. Let's put the Gosars. That's true. He's one of 10. He's one of 10.
Is that indicative of the future demographics of the state of Arizona? Is there some greater meaning to the 4 and 10, 4-6 split between haters and supporters in the Gosar family?
Oh my God, maybe. I don't know. When you just take a light Googling of this guy and all the crazy stuff he believes, and then you see that he's up 30 points in a race for freaking Congress, it kind of puts into perspective, like, wow, the House of Representatives is wild. Like, this is not the professionals in the Senate. You can get some crazies up in here. I mean, you work there. You know that.
The Senate's got its own. The Senate's certainly got its quirks. A lot of you are going to punch unsubscribe when I say it, but it's really hard for me to think of Bernie Sanders at the same level of play as, I don't know. I won't name any more names. But the House, My God. And what happens is these people get into office at any level, and the power of incumbency is what it is, and they just become legitimate. They put on the Pope hat and people start kissing their ring, and they're just really hard to get rid of. And I think, there are a dozen Paul Gossers on the Republican side. There are a dozen Paul Gossers on the Democratic side. And I think that their party leaderships, the Pelosi's and the Ryans, would be real happy to see those seats flip. But of course, there are in the places where that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, if this is what the Arizona's 4th wants, it's what Arizona's 4th is going to get. I just couldn't believe. I thought when I first saw this video plan, I was like, man, this is deep. This is a deep cut. Like, what's going to happen? Blue wave. And then I looked at him, and he's going to win by 30 points. People love this crap. Like, I could not believe it. Could not believe it.
Dude, I like, no shit. Like, I was like, it was like watching, well, I'm not going to ruin Game of Thrones for like the 3 of you who haven't seen it, but it was, what Game of Thrones episode I'm talking about. It was that. It was like that. It was memorable.
So what else you got?
So I'm very progressive out here on the West Coast. So I imbue inanimate objects with the same inalienable rights that our Constitution gives citizens of this country. So I think the 19th Amendment needs a beer. The 19th Amendment needs a drink, whatever you want to call it. So refresher course, the 19th Amendment is the one that gave women the right to vote. And my high school history teacher at an all boys Catholic school explained it. Remember, women look the best when they're 19. The 19th Amendment is the one that gave women the right to vote.
Did that really happen? Or are you just making a joke? You gotta be serious.
No, that's a true story. That's true. But you know what? I've never in my life have I forgotten that the 19th Amendment is women's suffrage. So live by the sword, die by the sword.
Oh my God. Like, he went to a very reputable Catholic school. God, that is concerning. Holy crap. All right. Sorry. That's jarring. Go on.
Okay, so I'm going to quote from a recent Politico article here. A battle is underway for control of the Democratic Women's Working Group, a little-known caucus aiming to vastly boost its profile and influence in the next Congress. In practical terms, the conflict comes down to whether to hold a full-fledged open election to decide the Women's Caucus's next leader. It's a sore subject that's been, quote, under Pelosi's thumb, as one lawmaker put it. So the Women's Caucus, I guess, does not have voting, which I find inherently funny. So anyway, let me take this to the next level and just say what interests me about it is when you look at how Republicans organize themselves on Capitol Hill, it tends to be by occupation, the doctors caucus, the lawyers caucus, the cops caucus, the veterans caucus, and stuff like that. The Democratic caucuses seem to be organized a lot more by tribe, right? So the Women's Caucus, this is like an interesting small story, but I think it's a bigger story that we're going to see playing out in liberal politics is some of these tribal caucuses are obvious. Like the Congressional Black Caucus has an element to membership that's very clear. And there's a funny part of Capitol Hill lore that Steve Cohen, who represents Memphis, Tennessee, a majority Black district in Memphis, has tried to join the Congressional Black Caucus. Now, Steve Cohen is not a Black guy. He's a short white guy, and he drives an old ratty Cadillac up and down Independence Avenue. The Women's Caucus does not have a clear tribal thing. Half the people in the world are women, right? So the contest right now is between Brenda Lawrence, who's a prominent African-American member of Congress, and Lois Frankel, who is also a woman and happens to be Jewish as well. So I'm fascinated by the way that tribal politics, now that it's taking root, the way that many kind of college campus liberals have wanted it to, is now causing a lot of problems. It's causing problems because these constituencies now have to decide which one's more important than the other, which kind of runs against the grain of the thought that made us value them in the first place. So we'll see bigger fights like this going down the road. But for now, I think that this is just a funny thing to talk about.
Well, ideally, the Women's Caucus would be, 51% of either party. And I got to say, when you mentioned the Black Caucus, I was concerned that we were going to have to edit out the entire thing because you're from Kentucky. But no, it's interesting. I had never thought about this, the breakdown of the caucuses and the parties, because for Republicans, like you said, it can be the doctor's caucus, or you can sort of by profession, because they're all old white dudes. And so you have to distinguish by something, and they distinguish by profession. So I could see how the Democrats would face a different challenge.
And you joke, but I think that there's also one of the big differences in worldview between conservatives and liberals right now is that I think conservatives tend to view problems as more class-based, and I think liberals tend to view them as having more to do with race and ethnicity and that type of
Hard
stuff.
disagree, but not the subject of this podcast. But I do have someone else who definitely needs a beer this week. Are you ready?
Yeah, read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times if you want more on that. Yeah, let's get out the funnel. Who needs a beer?
Funnel is perfect because this person needs more than one. Marvin Chun, Dr. Marvin Chun. Dr. Chun is a professor of neurology who also happens to be the dean of Yale College. And man, has this week been shitty for him because all these stories are coming out that, as it turns out, at these hallowed academic institutions like Yale, where Brett Kavanaugh went, they're full of prep school dickheads who do crazy, irresponsible stuff, allegedly, but probably. And so this guy, it has to be absolutely killing him that all these stories are getting talked about Yale being this drinking cesspool, which Yale's just a college. They're all like that. You and I went to an Ivy League school. I'm sure if you were canned the stories from any weekend of the school year, it would be something the dean would not want on the national news. And now this is on the national news 24/7.
Okay, but here's what's even funnier about this to me is who knew that Yale was like the new Berkeley? And I don't mean that in a political sense. I mean that in a people just losing their shit over everything sense. Yale was the school that almost shut down over an email about Halloween costumes and how to wear Halloween costumes. And now it's, I guess it's synonymous with just shotgunning beers and playing with dildos and shit. I mean, I don't know. But there's also another side of this, which is when I was in college, all this Facebook and Google shit was new. And for years we've been laughing about like, oh, like what's like, yo, bro, like what's going to happen when like people run for office and shit who have like Facebook. And I feel like this is the leading edge of it now. Like this is the leading edge of when college is 4 years of competitive drinking and like trying to fuck anything that breathes. This is the type of shit that we're going to start seeing more and more of. So I don't know how that story plays out, but it's going to be playing out.
Well, I think there are 2 points from this that I think are very important to drive home. One being that what Brett Kavanaugh did allegedly, what was alleged to have done by this woman at Yale is something that we hung out with a pretty hard drinking, wild group of people in college, and we would never have done this. I'm not going to repeat what he did because it's not relevant, but if one of our friends had done this, we would have talked something aside the next morning and said, what is wrong with you? You're an animal. Like you need to stop. You need to calm down. One. And two, the second point is that Yale is not, I know Yale is now leading this revolution of, people speaking out about these issues. Yale is not some bastion of like liberal hippie dippiness. Yale has a memorial to every person that ever went to the school that ever died in military service engraved in a marble wall. It is a powerful monument to see. This is not a place this is not your liberal ivory tower. This is not Stanford. This is not Berkeley. This is a place that they're speaking out. I think it still probably means something.
I don't know the answer to this question, but it's a question I ask others and myself, and yet I still don't, and they still know the answer. But like, what happened? There was, if you watch like the Dead Poets Society movies and you read the Goodbye, Mr. Chips and those books, and all these Ivy League schools were so synonymous with being these stodgy conservative places. And I don't know, I guess something changed at some point, but that's certainly not the case now.
Switching over quickly to the world of sports, there's a new to broadcasting sportscaster needs a beer. Jason Witten, the former tight end, future Hall of Famer from the Dallas Cowboys, talking about the new roughing the passer rules. The NFL said, quote, they've just gone too far with that rule. I know they wanted to make it about the health and safety and protecting these quarterbacks, but it just seems like we went a little bit to the left wing on that, Well,
okay, so I think this is important. This is when it's like really important to go by the facts, to be analytical, okay? So you're a lawyer, like what do you think the definition of a left-wing version of a tackle is?
I don't know, like asking someone to sit down?
Like a nonviolent sit-in or something?
Yeah, just being like, it'd be really cool if you sat down now. That would really help the cause. It'd be the best thing for everyone in the field.
Okay, so I was actually thinking a different way. So I was thinking as a conservative, what is the left wing's favorite thing in the world to do? And I know that you can complete that sentence for me as a member.
It's killing me not to. It's killing me not to, but please go on.
And that is to redistribute things from other people.
Object.
So
object.
If you think about the glory that a quarterback has versus maybe the fame and prestige that a linebacker or a defensive tackle or someone like that has, I guess it does make sense because it is redistributing from the quarterback's position of privilege to the less privileged position of the defensive tackle or the linebacker. So I can see where he's coming from. I don't know. I mean, we could probably talk about a right wing rule change. I think that's reasonable.
I think this rule is a right wing rule change. 100%.
Ooh,
100%.
Hot take.
This is not about this rule specifically. I know the NFL has made a lot of advancements in player safety, but this rule is not about player safety. This is about capitalism. It's called roughing the passer because the passer is the most marketable person on the entire team. There's never been a season where every team had a good quarterback and people want to see points on the board. This is not trying to protect their safety. This is trying to make the game more watchable. The protecting the passer rule is a business decision. There is no roughing the middle linebacker play because they don't care.
It's not a $100 million piece of machinery.
Yeah, like you want to keep – I'm not saying the NFL's wrong about it, but they want to keep the people that make the game going able to stand upright. I think this is purely a business decision.
I think that what you just described is like a Ronald Reagan, maybe Paul Ryan type of right-wing rule change. I think like a real like Koch brothers, Ted Cruz right-wing rule change. I'm thinking it's more maybe telling the offensive and defensive tackles that they shouldn't wear helmets anymore and it'll be better for them. Like I think it's like a real right-wing rule change is convincing someone that something they don't need and they should voluntarily give it up. So, the day that they tell people to give up their helmets and like their knee pads, then I'm going to say that is a right-wing rule change.
Hey, and I'll tell you, it's an apt metaphor because it would be gory and exciting and fun until it all blew up. And that's probably kind of what's going to happen in about 50 days. But a topic for a different time.
There you have it. And that's a wrap on episode 2 of Star Spangled Gamblers. Remember, you can hit us on Twitter and Instagram at Star Spangled Gamblers. Any questions you've got, markets you're watching, topics you want to talk about, we're here. All we do is talk. Thanks for listening this week.